You are now tuned in to another episode of the Spillover Effect Podcast with work-life expert Michael Dickerson. The Spillover Effect Podcast is where Michael will help you understand how attitudes in one role can spill over into another, causing the spillover effect. With each conversation with well-known leaders, HR executives, managers, and hard-working employees, Michael wants to help organizations create positive workplace experiences. So let's explore the positive workplace experiences employees are having and what we can do to improve the overall employee experience. Here's Michael A. Dickerson with the Spillover Effect Podcast.
Welcome to the Spillover Effect Podcast, where we have conversations how to help organizations create positive workplace experiences. I am your host, Michael Dickerson, and we have a wonderful guest on the podcast today, Derrick Talkington. He is a mental health and addiction therapist, and I'm glad to have him on the podcast today. I've heard a lot about him. I heard from one of my colleagues who told me that you did an ethics training with, I guess, one of your, is he your partner?
One of my. I mean, he's a friend and a colleague, and we've had mutual projects for a number of years together.
They heard you. So my background's in mental health, and been working for the Department of Mental Health for a long time. Been in mental health for about 12 years, and they even said, this guy who did an ethics training is a podcaster, and he's also a therapist. And I said, what's his name? So they showed me too.
I've been called a lot worse than a podcaster and a therapist before.
So I was like, I need to talk to this guy because I got some questions. I think he'd be great for a podcast. But the podcast community is building up, so I was excited that you're a podcast, man. So what's the name of your podcast again?
So the Chasing Sanity podcast is like our flagship. Mm-hmm. My flagship, and then for years, I've tossed around the idea of doing some other ones that aren't necessarily that are different. I'm interested in theology and some other stuff like that, so I'd like to do one specifically focused on that. But the Chasing Sanity podcast is the flagship podcast.
Yeah, y'all have got how many episodes you in?
I think we're 70 deep. 70 deep right now. Yeah. We've had, you know how it is. Like there's like a 2-month stretch where you don't record at all just because life gets busy. Right. And for people that don't know this, I'm assuming like I don't make any money on my podcast. Yeah. Like my podcast actually costs me like $100 a month, for all the hosting and everything. And so there are just times where it's like that's got to go on the back burner, because there's other projects and other things that's got to get done. Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm happy to have you here, man. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is what I like to talk about, positive mental health. But I definitely want to get just your advice and just to get your input on definitely what's going on with Corona in terms of people dealing with mental health and just the quarantine and what you're seeing right now in terms of being a therapist and the addiction part of it. So what are you seeing right now? I know we're starting to see increases of a lot of mental health issues.
Man, these are dangerous topics to be asking me about, Michael.
That's why I want you here. Cause
nothing I say is endorsed by Michael Dickerson or the Spillover Effect Podcast, and it's just my opinion. Man, this is it's been a really interesting 2020, and I think my first thought is really just kind of heartache for people that are struggling and in a tough spot. Mm-hmm. We could dive deep into, the politics of the pandemic and, and all of those type things. But for me, the bottom line is that it's hurt a lot of people, both because people have suffered with sickness and lost some loved ones, not as much in our part of the country as they have, in the East Coast and the Northeast. And anytime people die, that's a sad thing.
Absolutely.
Right? But the effects and the ongoing effects of the pandemic crisis, I think are continuing to build. And I don't even know if we've seen the worst of what this is doing to people, socially, psychosocially, and with behavioral health. Everybody's just lonely, man. Mm-hmm. I feel it too. I feel like I'm probably one of the most people in my life that would listen to this are going to probably call bullshit on it. Can I say that?
You can.
Okay. Sorry. I'm used to having my own podcast.
We're on the podcast, man.
I'm like, I can say whatever I want on my show.
Yeah, you can say whatever you want to say. Absolutely.
People in my personal life are going to be like, call BS on it. But I consider myself to be probably, one of the more emotionally well-adjusted adults, right? Like,
absolutely.
I feel like I take good care of myself. I feel like that I continuously progress and challenge myself to grow, and all those things that I want my clients to do, I try to do for myself. And all of this has messed with me, and I consider myself to be really healthy, right? So I can only imagine if somebody, has ongoing struggles with depression or anxiety or even a more severe mental illness, what this is doing to them. We're isolated from our support systems. Not only that, there's just like this kind of fog of anxiousness, like nobody really knows what's going on. And I find myself not as much being anxious about, am I going to get sick or my loved one's going to get sick, but I'm anxious about, what's going to happen to my business, what's going to happen to, the things that I enjoy doing in life that I've had to give up over the last 4 years. Is any of that ever going to come back? Am I ever going to be able to go see a movie again? Am I ever going to be able to enjoy a dinner at my favorite restaurants like I used to, and be able to have parties and events and all of these type of things. And so I think that the effects of all this are going to build. And I don't think we're really going to know what this has done to people's emotional health until well after it's over. I think we're still going to be suffering the effects.
What type of tools are you giving people in terms of therapy, or just somebody who just ask you, you're a therapist, what type of things that you're helping them with? For me, I have people usually ask me because they know I work in the mental health field and do a lot of mental health stuff in the workplace. And I think exercise is important.
Sure.
We know that is huge. And not exercise, going to the gym. So you don't have to go to the gym, but just doing something. Like I heard a lot of people walking.
Absolutely.
Doing a lot of walking. And walking with maybe their spouse or their partner or their boyfriend or girlfriend, doing walking, and then and really diving into maybe some hobbies. I think that's I think that helps you like just deal with the situation, overwhelm. So just
for
curious
sure.
What you telling anybody?
I don't know if there's a magic bullet. I wish there was. If there was a magic bullet, I'd be on Dr. Phil,
absolutely,
right, selling him my magic bullet book. But I think the same things that I always tell people are healthy for them are the things that we have to find a creative way to continue to do those things in the midst of the changes that we're experiencing, right? So with the people that I work with, I tend to break life down into like 4 categories, right? Physical, spiritual, emotional, and social, right? And if we're healthy in those 4 areas, we're doing pretty good, right? So staying physically healthy is a challenge right now. For a lot of people, gyms are closed. They took the rim off the city park next to my house, so I couldn't go out and play hoops, with the neighborhood people anymore. And so anything that we can do to promote some physical health is important.
Absolutely.
Taking walks, I tell all my clients, like, you don't have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Right.
Like, I'm not advocating that somebody do that, but even a 20-minute walk every morning, to kind of bookend the beginning of your day can be super good for brain activity.
When the corona hit, the quarantine, what I plugged in, I would do it's interesting you say that, because I would do a 20-minute walk in the morning, and then this is like when we was in the mix of it, like March hit, it was the first 2 weeks, and I was like 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening. Yeah. It was sort of my way to just let loose, and because I usually go to the gym, and I couldn't go to the gym, anything like that. So I think that's good in terms of just letting that out, and it was like letting energy out and that overwhelmed feeling, and feeling like, oh man, what are we going through? So
I think the problem is with each of those categories: physical, emotional, spiritual, social. We, especially I think as maybe Americans and Westerners, we get real lazy and we become one-trick ponies, right? And so for a lot of people, like myself, maybe that are Christians and find church really important, aspect of their life, for a lot of people that get lazy with their spirituality, Sunday church is what keeps them spiritually healthy, right? Well, now all of a sudden we're in the midst of a national kind of state of emergency, and that was taken away from us. And so if that's the only thing that keeps you spiritually healthy, and now I've taken that, what are you going to do, right? Same thing with people that.
What about people who say, well, you got virtual church? How do you?
That stuff's weak, man. I mean, I get it. Like we have done the best we can,
absolutely,
right? Therapy is the same way, right? Every therapist in the country switched to telemedicine, right? Like I wish that I had invested stock in like DoxyMe and Zoom and all these telehealth.
You and everybody else, they have that crystal ball, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like if we only knew that you know. A million therapists were all going to be buying subscriptions to all these telemedicine services. But as beneficial as that is, and as much as that has kept my business going with some clients, it ain't the same.
Yep.
It's not the same as sitting in a room. Our church finally went back for services. No, I take that back. That's not what did it. I was down in Texas last week visiting a company that I do some marketing work for, Stages of Recovery. And, Texas just went to, or at least their county, everybody that is in the building has to wear a mask. Like that was their rule. And so I complied, obviously. I took my mask, but I'm sitting in a group therapy session, with 15 guys, and everybody's wearing masks. And I thought, I can't even see your face.
Right.
Like, how am I supposed to empathize with what you're saying, and how am I supposed to build connection with you when I really can't even see you? And so it made me think, like, we're doing the best we can.
Absolutely.
And that's better than no group. But I thought, man, how it must feel even worse for people doing telemed.
Yeah.
And so while it helps, it's not the same, So I've got lots of friends that are like specific gym rats, like CrossFit or boxing or, Muay Thai fight or all those type of things. Well, when that one thing is taken away from you and that's all you rely on for physical health and wellness, what are you going to do? So I think the moral of the story is we need to be much more well-rounded in how we care for ourselves. Like I have to have multiple strategies in play for what physical health looks like for me. It can't just be, my membership at Vaza Fitness, right? Because that membership might be gone tomorrow.
Right.
I've got to have multiple strategies. Spiritual health for me can't just be going to church on Sunday mornings, because that might go away, right? Like it has been. And so, and it's the same thing with emotional health. If the only thing that keeps me emotional healthy is journaling, and for whatever reason I get in a car wreck and break my hands, right? I know that's extreme, and I can't journal, well, what am I going to do with my emotional health, right? And so I want everybody I work with, and really everybody that I have this conversation with, to know, like, the more well-rounded and the more holistic all of our strategies are, the easier it is for us to adapt and be flexible.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So what does that mean for individuals in the workplace in terms of really dealing with these mental health issues, really dealing with some strategies? Like, a lot of what I really talk about is workplace health, really well-being. And so do you have any advice for anybody who is maybe going back into the work or in a working environment and been doing, as working from home? Like, what type of strategy you think they might need to implement?
I mean, remember to put pants on.
Yeah,
would
absolutely.
Be
Yeah, we definitely want to put those pants on. So,
we've gotten used to these Zoom calls.
Yeah,
and I know everybody in a shirt and tie ain't wearing any slacks.
Yeah, we was just talking about that. I was just talking about that at lunch. How a friend of mine's had up to 35 hours on a Zoom call in 1 week, and he was zoomed out.
That's
he said
insanity.
He zoomed out.
Yeah.
So So
wow. I'm
curious, just what that's going to look like as we try to phase back into the workplace in terms of office.
I don't know if some workplaces I don't think will ever be the same.
Oh no, I know that to be real true.
Yeah, we're going to see a shift, I think, in the professional community with understanding like how we interact and how we do things. And for a long time, a lot of businesses and a lot of companies have been reluctant to allow people to work from home.
Oh, yeah.
Because they thought you're not going to be productive.
Oh, you're preaching to the choir now, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now all of a sudden we've figured out, hey, this can be a successful model. Like this can work.
Yep.
Not only can it be a successful model, but we could potentially cut a ton of our overhead out if we hire work from home people versus have office space.
Yep.
And so I think either fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what your preference is, I don't know if some companies a lot of this will be permanent changes.
Yeah, the challenge though, and you've already just spoke to this. The challenge though is when you are working from home, the loneliness part, the feeling like I'm not a part of a team. Because I think a big part of going into the office, like I feel like I'm a part of a team, or I can have water cooler gossip, or we really working on a project, and man, we had this just really creative time, and so I don't know how much of work from home do that, and I'm a big proponent of work from home, and I talk a lot about flexibility, and I think that's important, but I think the emotional part of it and the mental health part of it, like we have to be very, very aware of what's going on with people at home.
Yeah, so that would be my fear for people that work at home. I have friends who have really thrived throughout the pandemic, and I ask them how they're doing, and they're like, "Are you kidding me, man?" Like, I've got a buddy of mine. I'll call him out vocally. His name's Matt Bivens, right? He works for American Fidelity, and he actually said to me, I said, "Man, like I feel like I'm not going to see you guys for months, like because typically when I hang out with my group of friends, like we're going to watch NBA games, we're going to watch football, like we're doing something social, we're having pizza, we're drinking a few beers, right?" And I was like, man, dude, I miss doing that kind of stuff. And he was like, dude, are you kidding me? Like I'm living the dream. Like, I haven't left my house in, like, 2 months. Wow. And he was like, he loves it, He's working from home. I mean, I think outside of not being able to go to his gym, like, he doesn't want it to go back, right? And there are a lot of people that I talk to that have really thrived. There are a lot of people that can't live that way, right? And I think that knowing who we are is important because that helps me when I'm talking to an employer. If my employer says, hey, we're thinking about doing this permanently, I can vocalize like, hey, if there's an option, my preference is this because I know myself, I would work better at an office than versus at home. Some of us just aren't, some people aren't self-starters like that anyway and can't handle it. But, maybe creativity is really important. Maybe if 4 or 5 people are all like, oh man, my bosses, they're making us all work from home. Well, there's a lot of shared work environments, so like who's to say that you and a couple of buddies don't, go rent a $300 a month little office somewhere,
right?
Or do coffee shop meetups and work your own work just in an environment where you can be more social.
And I think what's important is we have to validate what people's experiences are. Yeah. Like just because you thrive in that environment, another person might be, they got kids at home, husbands at home, wife is at home. They trying to do schoolwork as opposed to somebody else. Maybe they don't have that as much responsibility, so they feel the freedom to be able to do the work. And so I think we just can't say, what my experience is should be your experience.
Yeah. And I think companies have to be sensitive to that too, right? When you start to develop a strategy, for your business, it's important that your strategy, obviously your strategy has to be, fiscally strategic and what you think is going to be, the most financial benefit for your business. But we also, I think, owners, managers, middle management all have to realize that in my opinion, right? Again, my opinion, all this is just me, but, your company is going to live or die with your employees. And being able to consider an employee's needs socially and in a psychosocial setting can really add value.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of companies, a lot of businesses, I think, that are very mediocre because they don't place enough value in understanding that their employees are people, and that if we can build up, the emotional confidence, the social confidence of a team, they're going to produce better.
Yeah.
They're going to thrive more.
And you're actually saying one of the buzzwords now that we're hearing. Well, we've been hearing it for years now, but we call it humanizing the workplace.
Oh,
really understanding.
I didn't know there was a term.
Yeah, that your employees are people and treat them as such.
Right.
And so I think that is so important that we meet their needs, and that's one of the things that I really discuss about well-being, and that's what I really want to talk to you about too, is really moving from just that very disease and deficit model part of mental health. How can we go to the positive mental health, and why that's important?
And you phrasing it that way, humanizing the workplace, that's brilliant. Somebody made a lot of money coming up with that phrase, right? That has so much more to do with just how we're treating people during a COVID pandemic, too. I mean, look at everything that we've been dealing with as a culture and as a society and as a nation in terms of racial disparities and injustice, and how much better people would be served in a work environment to have an employee look at them and understand that they might be hurting because of what's happening in the bigger picture of culture and society. Because I'm sure that there are a lot of people that are going to work who think that their boss could give a flying flip about what's happening in the world related to racial injustice. And for somebody, who might be an employee of color, a boss or a manager coming in and just sitting down and saying, hey, man, how can we as an office support what's going on nationally, what's going on locally? Do you have any ideas about how our workplace could change? I mean, how empowering is that for an employee? And I'm just a big fan of when you treat people that way, people will invest in your business. Yeah. Right? They'll invest. I mean, if my business ever grows to where I hire people, I would prefer to hire people that would take a bullet for me. Yeah. Well, that's what I don't want people to hate me.
Yeah, you want that, right? You want loyalty. You want to build a positive culture. You want to build a culture where people feel like when they come to work that, the manager care about them, leadership cares about them, their manager, knows that they just had a baby, or, I got to pick my kid up from school because my kid is sick, and I said, no, you got to stay here, find somebody else. Like, how much more will your employee invest into your company if you do that, if you humanize them?
When you go to bat for people like that, they're going to go to bat for you.
Absolutely.
When they're dealing with customers, right? And so I feel like no matter what the business is, there is lots of payoff. I think that for a long time, companies were resistant to that because they thought that, it's going to create HR liabilities, or we don't want to humanize the workplace too much because this is just a job for people. And unfortunately, and I do think this is unfortunate, it's not just a job for people anymore. In our current culture, most of what we do centers around our careers and our work.
Well, we're starting to see that just from some of the research that I'm reading, is that the workplace, an organization, is becoming the hub of people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have to take that into consideration.
Yeah.
And so that's why we have to meet the needs of your employees. And so I think that is so important to think about, that they put a lot of emphasis on, like, my workplace has to fill a lot of needs. And so one of my good friends that I just had a podcast with, Adrienne Young, she came in here and talked about they really want to discover purpose and meaning in the workplace. And we're seeing that in droves now. And so if you're not an organization that helps individuals find their purpose and meaning within your organization, you're not going to be able to retain them very long. Yeah. And so that's what we're starting to see.
I think the challenge becomes, like, for an organization, I'll pitch it, right? I'm drinking a cup of coffee from Claussen Coffee, right? Best coffee shop in town, my opinion.
Your opinion.
I eat breakfast with their owner every Friday morning. We're good friends. So maybe that's why I think it's – but, thinking about, my buddy Robin, who owns Classen Coffee, and thinking about, how do we create purpose and meaning for people? For somebody like Robin, he might, at the surface level, think, I'm just a coffee shop, man. Like, I have 8 or 10 college students that come in and make coffee. Mm-hmm. like, what do you mean purpose and meaning, right? Mm-hmm. And so even in bigger companies, you think about somebody that might, work at the Apple store, right? Well, how can they find purpose and meaning in that? And I think it's up to companies when they can humanize the workplace and when they create a certain type of culture, you find the purpose and meaning outside of your normal job duties, right. Or you can, right? So it might be that company really partners with a community organization or a charity organization in the city and helps people get connected where they can feel like they're giving back, right? Yeah. And so there's lots of ways for companies to create purpose and meaning, not purpose and meaning and, my purpose is to pour this coffee, right? Yeah. That's not nobody's purpose is to pour coffee, right? That's part of your job duties, right? But your purpose and meaning can be much bigger than that in terms of the culture of an organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the other things is, we've both been in the mental health field for a while, and you being a therapist have studied mental health and also looking at the disease model in terms of dealing with anxiety and dealing with depression and addiction. And so we hear a lot about that part of it. And so I've studied what they call positive psychology. Mm-hmm. And positive psychology, the term that they use is called optimal human functioning. But I always like to say it's the science of what's right with people. And so just thinking about that in terms of positive psychology and looking at what's right with people and looking at what they call the PERMA, so looking at, how people really have positive emotions, really looking at how they engage in the workplace, their relationships, what that looks like in terms of also achievement. What type of strategies would you advise somebody to really try to focus on well-being? Because a lot of times we hear so much about the negative side, but I really want people to understand there's a positive side to mental health too. And if people was to look at the World Health Organization definition of mental health, it gives a very positive outlook of mental health.
Sure. So, yeah, one of the things that, and this is, I've noticed that there's been cycles in my career, right, where even I change how I think about things. Mm-hmm. If you don't do that in your career, you're probably stagnant and not failing in some way, right? But even how I look at addiction now is much different than how I looked at addiction 13 years ago when I first started doing addiction treatment. And so how I look at mental health obviously has changed as well. One of the things that's changed most recently about working with people who might be struggling with depression and anxiety is we spend so much time telling people to change that, right? And I don't know if that works. I could have somebody that deals with anxiety come into my office all the time, and I could work with them session after session after session with CBT skills and grounding skills and breathing techniques and let's help you be less anxious. Let's help you be less anxious. And at some point, I think you have to look at them and say, it's okay that you're anxious. There's not anything wrong with that. You're not broken. You're not in some sort of despairing position. You just feel anxious a lot. Mm-hmm. And I think instead of trying to get people to change that, I think a lot of what we need to do is get people to be comfortable being anxious, right? Wow. And get people, there are some people that are always going to be a little anxious or a little depressed, or there are people that are always going to struggle with their post-traumatic stress after a trauma event. And I don't want to fix you because you're not broken. You're a person, right? I want to help you be comfortable in your own anxiety so that your anxiety doesn't freak you out, right, and it doesn't cause you problems in the workplace. And you can wake up one morning and go, man, I'm feeling really anxious today. I wonder what that's about. Let's do some self-exploration, but I don't have to be worried about that. It's not going to affect my day,
that's
right?
Good.
And so I think a lot of what we need to do is just help people understand. And, this is, for people who have, been in a program of recovery, they've heard this 1,000 times. But, we've got to teach people to be comfortable in their own skin and be comfortable with who they are.
Absolutely.
And so I think the more self-exploration work people can do, the naturally better off they're going to become, and the more well-adjusted they're going to become.
Yeah, and if people really got into history, most of our great leaders had some type of mental health issue.
Lots of them
and thrived,
yeah,
and was very resilient. And that's what I think that we have to take more from. Like a lot of people don't know Martin Luther King dealt with a lot of depression.
I didn't know that,
Martin Luther King dealt with a lot of depression.
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln, there's a great Lincoln's Melancholy is a really good book that talks about his own mental health struggles. Yeah.
And so I think people have to. I really like that what you use. Like, it is okay to be a little anxious. Like, be in that. It's fine, and just deal with it, and keep going and keep pushing, because we see people be resilient all the time. And so I just really like what you just said. That's good.
People feel debilitated by their own emotions, and like there's no such thing as a bad or an unhealthy emotion. Like, emotions are just feelings, or they're things that there are internal responses to things that are happening around us. So sometimes anxiety is really normal, and if you don't feel anxious, there's probably a problem. If I told somebody they had to give up and give a speech in front of Congress, they should be anxious about that.
Absolutely.
If they're not, they're probably manic.
Yeah.
And they're going to get up there and Charlie Sheen this thing. And so I just think that people need to learn about themselves. Yeah. They need to embrace that, strengths and weaknesses, because what people perceive as weaknesses usually aren't weaknesses. It's this, they're just self-conscious about those things, right? And if they can work through some of that, they can learn to be a little bit more holistic in who they are and understand that, like, hey, I'm not great at everything. And that's okay, because the things that I'm good at, I'm good at.
Absolutely.
And that's why what's the word I'm looking for? Social doesn't even cut it. That's why interpersonal connection is so valuable to people. Yeah. Because we're built for community. We're built for community engagement. And one of the reasons we're built for that is because I'm not good at everything. Yeah, and that's important. I think you just said something important there, because that's what we talk about in terms of going to the workplace. When we talk about working from home and being in the office, I keep talking about that I believe it's going to be a hybrid with options. Yeah. Maybe I might come in the office 2 times a week, and I might stay at home 3 times a week, because still going into the options give me that social connection that I need. Yes. We know that we're very social beings, and we still need those relationships, not the virtual relationships. We need the face-to-face relationships, and so I just think that's so important. Like podcasting, a lot of people right now doing the virtual podcasting, but to me, there's nothing like sitting here right here in front of me. Like, the energy is just. I'm the same way. I've had people that have been out of state and have been like, "Oh, I want to come on your podcast," And one of my best friends is a national ag news anchor up in Indiana, and he wanted to set up something. And I was like, "Dude, I would rather you just wait till you come down for Christmas to see your family, because the reason I started my podcast because I like doing this. I like sitting down with somebody, having a cup of coffee, and talking about life. About it. It just doesn't feel the same when you're doing it on a video. Yeah. Because I get this impression, and probably not in a podcast, because hopefully people are a little bit more invested, but I know that 75% of the time that people are on a work Zoom call, they're doing other stuff. They're checking Facebook, and they're shopping on Amazon. Are they telling their kid to stop? Or they're turning their camera off so they can go do something. I'm like nobody's paying attention. We know, because we do it too. Exactly. I do it too. I'm like, I'm going to stop this video real fast. I'm going to give me a snack or something, and I'm going to watch a quick ESPN take, and then I'm back. The reason I'm muted is because I got Netflix going in my other headphones, And so I want people to remember that the reason that community is important is the same reason that relationships, intimate relationships, intimate friendships and romantic relationships are important, because where I feel like I fall short, my community picks me up.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing more empowering than knowing that with a community, I've got exponential power.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When
we feel alone, we feel stuck because we don't know what to do. So I think the biggest thing that I think has happened in this pandemic is it's created a whole bunch of loneliness and a whole bunch of isolation.
Yeah. How's it affected your business? I know you talked about that a little bit. Now, what's the name of your
Blackbird Cooperative is the name of my company, and
what do y'all do there? Tell us a little bit. What do you do?
So I call it a community development firm, because that's the goal. My goal is to create partnerships with the community where we're educating people about mental health and addiction and creating change on a kind of a bigger level. Within that, we do, I do some private practice work and I do some client work, but I'm a certified mental health first aid trainer, and so I offer mental health first aid trainings to churches and businesses and corporations and nonprofit organizations. I do a ton of just educational trainings and speaking and that type of stuff. And then up until the COVID pandemic, we were doing all of the drug and alcohol prevention programming for Edmond Public Middle Schools.
Okay.
So that was a pretty big contract for us. But obviously when school nixed, that project got nixed too. And unfortunately, I don't think that project's coming back for that school system. So I say we do community development work around behavioral health and addiction.
Okay.
Really, I probably would say that I'm more of a mental health and addiction mercenary, right? Like wherever I can go, wherever I can go create change and maybe make a little money, that's where I'll go, right?
Absolutely.
So I've got all different kinds of irons in the fire.
Okay, good. Yeah, you sound like you got a lot going on. So you have a partner there too, right?
I did until about a year and a half ago. Okay. So just a solo gig now.
Because that's where I heard about you and your partner. Yeah.
Okay. So we're still office mates. We still share a suite together, but we just had some different professional goals and decided to kind of do some different stuff. Yeah, for sure. It
happens all the time, man. Well, before we get ready to finish up, because our time is on, I think I sent you some questions. Did you get your questions?
I refused to read them.
All right, I'm gonna go
because I was like, man, I want to be as honest as I can when I hear the questions.
All right, here they go. You ready before we get ready?
I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if your audience is ready.
I think you're ready.
All right, I got to get in like the $10,000 pyramid kind of mindset. I know that's not what we're doing.
If money and time was no object, what would you be doing right now?
For a career or for fun?
For anything. If money and time was no object.
I'd be traveling and writing.
Anywhere specific you want to go?
Everywhere that I've never been.
Okay.
If money was no object, I would be podcasting, writing, and traveling full time.
Okay.
Those are the three things I would be doing.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Sporting event or live concert?
Sporting event. I'm not much of a music person.
Really?
Yeah. When I go, I enjoy it. But I've never been one of those people that I'm like, oh, music speaks to my soul. Yeah. It's just fun. Right? Like I went and saw Garth Brooks when he came to Oklahoma City. It was awesome.
You think football coming back?
Man, I don't know what's going to happen with sports. Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen with all this. Mm-hmm. I think it should come back. I think everything should try to normalize as much as possible, but that's more
Somebody made a good point to me. They said football's going to come back, but they don't know how long it's going to last.
Well, and I don't know, if maybe it'll come back without fans, but I don't know how an athlete gets pumped for that. Yeah. That seems boring to me.
Yeah, very, very boring, especially if you've been an athlete, you know how that is.
Yeah.
On a scale from 1 to 10, how good are you at keeping secrets?
Other people's or mine?
Other people's.
10.
10.
I'm great at keeping secrets.
You're a therapist though, so I figures I was like,
I'm
with all the HIPAA laws and things like that.
I'm great at keeping secrets, with the exception of I cannot keep like fun secrets, like if I buy my wife something really cool for Christmas, but it's October, I'm like, I can't wait till Christmas. Here's your gift. Like I'm too excited, right? Yeah. But like an important secret, I can put that in the vault for sure. Yeah.
Good. Couple more. If you could have dinner with anyone from history, who would it be?
C.S. Lewis.
See, why C.S. Lewis? Great theologian.
C.S. Lewis, for people who aren't familiar with him, he was a person who experienced lots and lots of pain in his life and wrote in depth about how to transform pain into something else. Mm-hmm. And I just think it would be fascinating to hear that from him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good. Which is better, a book or a movie?
100% depends on the book and movie. Mm-hmm. I love reading, but I love movies too. Like I think I mentioned this earlier. One of the things I'm upset about is I haven't been to a movie in months, man. And a lot of movies are getting delayed. So I love them both. I'll always read the book first if there's a movie coming out. And then, but I'll admit that Jurassic Park was so much better than the book, the movie. Like, Lord of the Rings, so much better than the book. So, it just depends.
Yeah, last little thing. If you could change one thing about the workplace, what would it be?
Just the workplace in general, my workplace.
The workplace in general.
My gut said that we all make more money. Money don't fix those problems. Man, if I could change one thing about the workplace, maybe I would increase the amount of grace and mercy that people have for one another in the workplace.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we all just give each other a little bit more mercy and grace instead of coming down on each other so hard all the time.
Good. Yeah. Well, thank you, man, for being on the podcast. It's great to have you.
Oh, man, it was my pleasure. I'll come back anytime.
You lived up to what everybody said you was.
Well, we'll see how many people enjoy it.
Yeah.
You might get a bunch of complaints.
Nah. If I do, I don't listen to them. Anyway.
Right. Yeah.
This is a podcast. You can be able to talk about what you want to talk about. How can people reach you, man?
So the easiest way to keep track with what I'm doing is to follow me on Facebook, and you can do that at Blackbird Cooperative and at Chasing Sanity Media.
Absolutely.
Blackbird Cooperative has everything on it. All the podcasting stuff goes through there. All the company stuff goes through there. I'm trying not to use the other one as much, but I still have to because people are still following it. It was the first media page we had. Yeah, go follow him on Facebook. Yep. And so if you know anybody that's dealing with any type of mental health issues or addiction, definitely get on Facebook and reach out to him. I'm sure you got you can send me a direct message on Facebook. And that's an easy way to get in touch with me if you want to refer a client or you want to talk about how I might be able to help your organization. That'd be great. Good. All right. Well, thank you very much, man. Yeah, thanks for having me.
And this wraps up another episode of the Spillover Effect Podcast with Michael Dickerson. But Michael will be back to tackle more issues on how to improve your overall employee experience. Again, this has been the Spillover Effect Podcast with Michael Dickerson.